Hey, Jeannie.
Hey, Claire.
Do you remember that time that you took a job that really didn't fit with your values and kind of made you feel like you weren't living very authentically?
Oh, yes, I remember that.
And what did you do?
I left after the first week.
This is my sister, Jeannie, and she is a rebel. So, Jeannie, I know that rebel is one of the four tendencies. Can you tell us a little bit about the four tendencies?
Yeah, so the four tendencies are a framework that a woman named Gretchen Rubin came up with, and she describes it as accidentally stumbling upon them. She does a lot of work around how to life hack and how to make things better. She has a book called Better Than Before, and one of the things that she discovered is that people have very different responses to expectations, whether they're internal or external, and she set up this four-part framework to help people identify which one of those tendencies they fall into.
Okay, so I know that you work as a coach and you work with executives, you work with companies and individuals, and that your main goal is to help people align their values with money so that they can live authentically, essentially. So can you talk to me about how you use the tendencies in your work as a coach?
Absolutely. So the first thing is I always work with my clients to identify which of the tendencies they have. So there's four tendencies in the framework. The first one is an upholder, and then obliger, and then questioner and rebel.
Okay.
And so by identifying which one of those you are, that helps me to set up accountability and motivation for you, but then it also helps you to know the entire framework, because understanding the tendencies of those people that you work with and the people around you can be really helpful as well.
Okay, so I don't know as much about the four tendencies as you do, but I do know that the obliger is the one that I think it's 40% of the population identifies as obliger. Can you start there and tell us a little bit about the obliger?
Yes, for sure. So the obliger is someone who readily accepts but maybe they have a harder time when they're wanting to set up a new commitment of going to the gym. So in that situation, having an accountability partner or an app or something to keep you on track can be a really good idea. A lot of my clients, when they find out that they're obligers, they're like, oh man, I didn't want to think that I needed all that external accountability. The great news for obligers is that it's so easy to set up external accountability. And so really I feel like the obliger tendency is the easiest one to crack the code and really set yourself up for success.
So those would be the people that, like, a Fitbit would be a great motivator, or,
Yes.
you know, there's an app where you can drink more water and you click a box. So things like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, so what about upholders? Can we talk about those next?
Yes. So upholders are the people, you know these people I'm sure, who meet every single external and internal expectation. So if it's on their to-do list, whether that is a goal that they've set for themselves or an expectation that they have at work, they are really hard workers, they're internally motivated. And everybody, when they hear about this, they say, well, I wish I was an upholder. Or they want to be an upholder. Lucky for the upholders. The challenge with being an upholder is that a lot of times you can take on responsibilities that aren't yours. And you also have the likelihood of experiencing burnout at some point.
Okay.
So I would advise upholders to really ask themselves, like when they're walking away from a conversation, am I taking on any responsibility that's not actually mine or that hasn't actually been assigned to me?
Okay, so self-care would be really important.
Very important.
Okay,
Yes.
and also maybe just trying to figure out how to invite a little flexibility in. I think Gretchen talks a little bit about that upholders can come across as a little inflexible because their
Yes.
commitments are very rigid.
Yes.
Okay.
But they're very good at boundaries.
Right.
You know, so
Sure.
all of the tendencies have positives and challenges, areas
Okay.
for improvement.
Okay, so the next, let's talk about questioner.
Okay. So questioners are a lot of fun. I'm sure that you can identify the questioners in your meetings. So questioners are those who, whether it's an internal or an external expectation, they need to understand their why. So Simon Sinek has this great book, Start With Why.
Okay.
And so for a questioner, if you work with questioners or if you're perhaps married to a questioner, you would want to really make sure that when you are asking them to do something for you or asking them to get on board with a project, that you take the time to really dive in and explain the reason behind the expectation that you're setting.
I think you were talking to me at one point earlier about, for example, Blue Jean Friday. So a questioner might say, well, why do I can only wear blue jeans on Fridays? What makes Fridays different? Why can't I wear them every day?
Yeah.
So that's the person who just needs to understand. I'm pretty sure I'm married to a questioner. So this is actually really helpful in helping me figure out how I can approach, things with him. So
when you ask him to take out the trash,
right,
or do the dishes, make sure you explain
them why.
why.
Okay. So let's talk about rebels.
Okay.
I am reluctantly identified as a rebel, which I think is funny that I immediately resisted the category of rebel. That seems to probably be fitting.
Yes. So rebels are very interesting and can be challenging for the rebel and also for the people who work with or connect with rebels. So rebels tend to resist both external and internal expectations. There's a tendency called negative first response. And so a lot of times with a rebel, like the moment you ask them to do something or they ask something of themselves, they tend to come across negatively towards that expectation.
Okay.
The key for rebels is you've got to get inside the expectation and figure out, how is this aligned to who I am as a person? So that's like the ultimate motivator for a rebel. So if you have a child who's a rebel or a coworker who's a rebel, or you're on a team and you happen to be leading a rebel, I encourage you to take the time to get to know that person and to understand what's important to them, what they value. And when you're asking things of them, it will help you get things done and get along.
Right.
You can connect it to really what their beliefs are, what their values are, and who they are as a person.
Okay, because I think authenticity is really important to rebels. Is that correct?
Super important.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
And people wonder, like, well, how can rebels really be productive in the workplace if they're constantly resisting internal and external expectations? And so one example I like to give of this is, like, I identify as a coach, as a professional. And so that really keeps me humming right along and running a successful business. So as long as you have that identity in place and you can connect your expectations to that, there's no reason why you can't, move forward, getting things done, being a productive person in the workplace. Okay.
So do you have any last minute tips on just the best way to use these when maybe managing people?
Yes. So it is critically important to understand which tendency the people who report to you fall into. A lot of times, something that is seen as a lack of motivation or maybe someone just not following through, those things can get heightened in the workplace. But a lot of times, if you have an obliger and you put a due date on a task, problem solved, right? If you have a questioner and you're willing to go the extra mile and just explain the why, then you don't have like a behavior problem or a motivation problem. It's really gets down to these expectations.
Okay, this has been really helpful, I think, in helping manage conflicts in both personal life and professional life. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to everyone for joining us, and hope you'll tune in to future and even looking at some past human intelligence series. We look forward to seeing you next time.